Hi guys, welcome back to this mini training where I'm going to show you guys how to turn these brows into a thicker shape without going too bold or too blocky. So here we're removing makeup with our cleanser, and I'm using the GG cleanser. We just want to make sure that it's completely off of the skin. And we're going to be doing a brow wax and stain today. And we're just going to begin by trimming down any hairs that are really long, but we want to keep most of this fluff because if we trim down too short, it's going to end up making the brows look a little bit too short and a little too thin. So because she wanted a thicker shape, we wanted to keep as much length as possible. So here I'm just evening out the shape. And if you guys want a more in-depth look at this, where we go in on a model and I show you millimeter by millimeter, my trimming technique, we have that all inside my signature course Badass Brows. So here I am starting with the longest hairs at the front and then I'm working towards the tail. And really what we're looking for here is making sure that the hairs are pretty flush against the shape of the brow. And then after we have our trimming, we can save the rest for the end of the brow. We're going in with our mapping and we want to keep the end in mind, which is a thicker, softer arch shape. So it's super important that when we go to map that we're not just placing the lines, right? It's not random at all. And that's how a lot of educators teach. But in my trainings, I teach my students to keep the end in mind. So that way you can reverse engineer your lines, right? So you can know exactly why you're placing the lines and how you're placing the lines. And we go over the 8 main brow shapes inside my trainings. And that way you know exactly, what you need to change up in terms of the angles, in terms of just like whether you're doing a more upward tail or a tail that droops below the front. All of those things matter when we're going to create our shapes, right? So it eliminates the guesswork. So if you're looking for a process like that where you are having it all be broken down and easy to follow, then we have that inside of Badass Brows. So we are marking the top lines now, and we want to, you can see, extend the top line because it is a little bit more sparse at the top, which kind of creates like a little bit of a dip. So we want to, create more space by heightening that line on top. And then we are taking our string and creating the bottom line below. Sometimes I like to use gloves because this can get pretty messy. But we want to keep it as close to the hairs as possible. And as you can see on the tail here, I am trying to preserve as much hair as possible because if I were to take that string and line it up to where the hairs are the most dense, it would thin out that tail so much, you guys. So you're gonna watch at the end how keeping that tail thick really just make sure adds to the shape. So we want to, because she's in the process of doing brow rehab, we want to keep as much hair as possible. And as you can see, we're only really going to clean up the lines that are outside of the shape, and then I do that with the wax, and then I do the detailing with the tweezing as well. So we're going in with our brow code wax here. This is my favorite wax. You guys will see it in literally all of the videos because you'll hear me say that it picks up on the hair the best. I've tried Star Pill, I've tried other brands, but I feel like this has the most flexibility after it dries. Like you can work at a pretty good speed, whereas I feel like a lot of the other waxes, they will break. So I usually go up and then I go in reverse when it comes to the middle line, and you can go over the skin twice as long as the skin is not pink or irritated. And yeah, I'll just work that at the bottom here, and usually I will do it in either one pull or sometimes I will section it off depending on their skin. But you want to work at a pretty good speed. You don't want to go too slow otherwise. Like if you're having a really hard time working with hard wax, if you go too slow, the wax will ball up. And I know that's what a lot of artists experience, which is why they hate using hard wax. So if you guys want to learn to master that, which I use on most of my clients because I feel like sometimes soft wax can be really, really harsh. And, a lot of my clients use retinols. They go outside in the sun. I live in Las Vegas. So using soft wax can cause a little bit more tearing and ripping and irritation. Whereas this hard wax really only focuses on pulling on the hairs. And you can even add another barrier, which I know a lot of people use the second skin or powder to, create more of a barrier. That way you're not causing any tears. So here you can see when I go to pull that, even though the wax is not fully dry yet, it remains tacky. It's not causing any more irritation to the skin, right? So Here we're going in, and I did not map her, but what I'm doing is a more of a freehand style application, which, you know, are not really in some of the other tutorials. But here I am just kind of following the outside of the shape that we have created. And this is more of an advanced technique. So I'm just working from the tail, and I'm applying, notice how I'm applying that stain on the areas that are the sparsest first. That way that gets a little bit darker than the rest of the brow quicker. And then I'm going in and filling that in later. So I work on the sparsest parts first. So that way that processes immediately. And then we're again keeping that tail nice and thick here. But if you do need more assistance, you know, you can always remap and apply that later. But here I'm just freehanding because I guess that was the mood I was in. And then I am just, you know, using a little bit of product on my brush, you guys. I'm not, you know, I use like a liquid developer versus the thicker developer, just because if you use a thicker developer and your solution, whether that's like Bronson or Brow Daddy, it tends to turn into more of a thicker gel consistency, which means that you're gonna have to pat the product in more. So anytime I can, I do use a liquid developer, and I feel like that helps me create thinner passes. Though I do feel like the cream developer does really like make the pigment look a little bit more vibrant. So I would recommend experimenting with that a little bit more to see how your guys's even though it's like the same percentage, I really do feel like it kind of makes a difference with the end result, right? So here I am, I'm flipping my brush, and you know, I teach all of the angles and all of the pressures, all of the speeds, all the different types of techniques that you can use to create different kinds of results inside my Badass Brow training. But if you guys just want to get a little bit of a taste tester, I have my Bye Bye Blocky Brows mini training for only $47 in the links below, you guys, where I go over 3 of the different types of staining techniques that I use personally. Right now I'm doing traditional, and on the fronts I'm going to show you here, I'm doing a hair stroke technique where we're kind of just lining that with different strokes. That way you're, you know, not having to wipe it off to create an ombre, and then it kind of creates like those hair-like strokes for them in the front, and just keep it, I feel like it gives it like that more fluffy look. And you can actually do this throughout the entire brow, so long as they have, you know, enough hairs to make it sure that it blends correctly. And if you guys are working, just a really quick tip, if your client is blonde, you want to make sure that those strokes are not super dark, especially if they have hair. Otherwise it might end up looking like a zebra. So you just want to make sure that saturation is nice and even, right? So here's that first pass, and you can see that it's still a little bit patchy on top, so I may go over that with a little bit more stain, so that way it's a little bit darker and it blends better. So yeah, I'm going over here the bottom with a little bit more stain, so that way it is a more blended. And there's a common myth that you're supposed to, you know, have the stain be all good after the first layer, but no, I totally recommend going in again with a second layer, a third layer, you know what I mean, to just kind of do some patchwork, touching up in the areas that really need it, so that way you don't over process the hair, you guys. So with this client, since she has, you know, darker medium tan skin, we processed that stain for about 5 minutes. I wiped it off with a damp aesthetic wipe, and then I'm going in with another layer just to make sure that the rest of the skin takes. And then we are done with that. So in total, we processed that stain for about 8 minutes. And then we're going in with our Buff Brows palette. I forget which color this is. And I'm using my Morphe brush, which again, I have all of the products listed in my brow guide below. And then the great thing about that brow guide is it's not your typical brow guide, guys. I'm really, really proud of it. It also has tips for beginners and intermediate artists that you can apply right away for free, that, you know, will help you up-level your work. So if you guys have been wondering like what tools artists like me use to create results like this, it's literally jam-packed with so much value and information. So here we're going at a slower speed. Again, I don't know if you guys know this, but the speed that you move your brush at will determine how defined those lines end up looking, as well as like what brush you use and all the things. So that is like my secret sauce. Like there's many different ways to conceal. And then because this is a brow wax and stain, I'm going in with some e.l.f. gel, which is honestly the Anastasia dupe, and styling her brows into place here. Just gently combing them over with a light layer of gel. Making sure that we brush those tips down. I'm keeping the fronts upwards though to keep that fluff. And here are the final results, thick but not blocky. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments below.